welcome back to The Doctor Will See You Now. Do you ever get that feeling that there was something missing and you weren't sure what it was? But then a good friend said, have you tried? Have you heard about? Do you know? Well, today's consultation is all about that. A huge thanks goes to fabulous author Avis Khan for putting me in touch with today's author, who sadly, to my detriment, I had not come across before. So thank you, Avis. Huge thanks. Please welcome into the consultation, Alan Gorevan. Alan, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Jackie. It's an honor to be here in your esteemed consulting room.
It's very kind of you to say so. I promise to be gentle, unlike your style of writing, shall we say. Gentle it is not, thrilling it is, twisty it is, and in parts gruesomely dark, but written oh so well. And so I know there are a number of books we could talk about, but what I would like to do is focus on your most recent novel, The Kindness of Psychopaths. And let's get to grips with that. But before, let me just introduce you with a little bit more background to the viewers. So Alan is an Irish thriller writer and an intellectual property attorney. A winner of the Irish Writers' Centre Novel Fair Competition. He's the author of the novels The Kindness of Psychopaths, Better Confess, and Out of Nowhere, and the novellas The Forbidden Room, The Hostage, and Hit and Run, and the short story collection Dark Tales. He lives in Dublin, where he's currently working on another thriller. So as I say, very welcome, Alan. Let's start with the title of this thriller, The Kindness of Psychopaths. I have to confess, I was immediately reminded of Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire and the notion of the kindness of strangers. Did your title come before or after the writing of the novel?
It came pretty late, so I was struggling with the title for a long time and writing away, and I think it was in the last month when I was editing it that it finally just came to me, because I was trying to find something that suited the tone of the book. And I didn't find anything. I wanted something striking, but also that gave a hint of the kind of the vibe. So if you've read the book, it's got a kind of, I mean, it's dark, but it also has a kind of black comedy, and I thought if I could reflect that in the title, that would be good. That would be, good for readers to get a preview of what they were in store for. So I think this is quite counterintuitive kind of title, and it suits the book. And as soon as it came to me, I thought, yeah, that's it. There wasn't another one.
But again, I really enjoy what you say, that you didn't set off with this title, and that you wanted a title that encapsulated, I mean, the premise behind the book, in a way. How do you pull that all together? And it certainly is a title that makes its mark. It's not one of those generic titles that seem to be a part of crime fiction writing. This really was like, and there are many moments in the book, so quite fitting. But let's get down to the premise of this, and then let's pull it apart somewhat. So we have a woman that goes missing, and I have to say I loved her name to start with. Valentina Lopez Vasquez. Being the Hispanist, I was drawn in immediately by the name, and it might seem a little bit of a trite question to ask, but why that Spanish name?
Right. Names are a thing that I think are very important to get right, and you don't always know what you're looking for until it comes. And I often change character names until I'm happy with it.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I mean, Dublin is kind of a cosmopolitan city
Mhm.
now. So, there are people from all different places, different cultures, different kinds of names. So they're all in the melting pot for me to possibly choose from.
Mm, mm,
And I think between Ireland and Spain, there's kind of a connection there with, I think a lot of Irish people love to go to Spain or have done traditionally for holidays. So there's kind of a link there. Like I was kind of thinking he may have, it's very likely that Barry would have visited Spain when he was younger, kind of thing.
mm,
That would be
mm,
a typical kind of Irish thing. So he might have an affection for it. He might come back later. He might meet someone from there, that kind of thing.
mm,
So
mm.
a name suited, I think. Felt right to
Yeah,
me.
yeah. It made me think again as well of the idea of how the fateful Spanish Armada, and how many of the sailors were washed up, um, in on the Irish shores, and on the Scotland shores, and how there is that link there, as you say, both historic and contemporary. So I just thank you for that. I loved seeing that name. I didn't love to see what happened to her, but loved seeing the name. So the woman disappears, and the investigation begins, and it's almost like the formal and the informal strand, shall we say, of
Yeah.
the investigation. Could you talk to us a little bit about bringing those two aspects together?
Yeah. So the book kind of has the form of a police procedural, but the focus is sort of very firmly in pacing and thrillery, like forward momentum. So I'm not really, the focus isn't on the police, kind of the formal police work, even though that is the structure of the novel. So I go to multiple different characters, different viewpoints, and they're all kind of moving forward on their own sort of track. So they're all sort of moving and mingling throughout the book. And it was important for me to not make it all police work. Yeah,
Mm,
I wanted
mm,
to be more human than that.
mm. And I do I love that you say that, because there's so many points in the book where you get that feeling of, either what would I do if it were my wife, or if it were me, what would I want people to do? I mean, that idea of how far would you go? You know,
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, sort of, yeah, Joe is sort of faced with that a lot, more than the other characters. But I mean, Joe and Barry are faced with that a lot.
mm, mm. Definitely, definitely. So you mentioned Joe. So let's bring Joe in at this point. Okay, DS Joe Byrne. Um, I wasn't sure at first about him, and I'm going to ask you about this trick that you have of, it's almost like learning the lesson of, don't let first impressions, you know, leave you in a place where you're not willing to find out more, or you're not willing to understand behind someone. There's a lovely technique that you've got there. But here we have a police officer who returns to his hometown,
Yeah.
and he is reluctant about doing so. Initially, you think he's not the man for the job. He's not going to be the one that saves the day. He's not, could you talk to us a little bit about his backstory and why he is reluctant to return?
Yeah, so he has left the area for personal reasons. So it's his hometown, but I'm not sure if it's the same in the UK, but in the Irish police, often you're moved around the country, especially when you're promoted, you're basically shot to another county straight away, so that you're not sort of policing your own community. So it's rare to be sort of policing in your own neighborhood. So Joe has spent years in different parts of Ireland, and he has sort of personal reasons for not returning to his hometown.
Mhm.
So then he's sort of summoned back, and he's absolutely not having any of it and not happy about this at all. So as soon as he arrives in the area, he's sort of sitting outside a cafe, staring at the Garda station, the police station, and sort of thinking like, I'm not staying here. So I'm gonna walk in there and quit basically if they force me to stay here. So he gets sucked into an investigation before he can really escape, and then he's the kind of person who wants to see it through. So that keeps him there.
And again, you bring in the thing of the qualities that we don't realize at first, the tenacity that is in, often with either with groups of students, if we're looking at crime fiction, or with a reading group that I belong to, we ask ourselves this question: is this the kind of officer that if your family went through something, would you want them?
Yeah, and in this case, Barry is not happy with Barry, the husband of the woman who has disappeared, is not at all happy with Joe's progress initially. Yeah, so that's another conflict. Joe is he's got multiple levels of conflict facing him throughout the book.
Most definitely, and one of those is, as we've hinted at, is he's coming back to a place where he has personal baggage.
Yeah.
Shall we say, a relationship that didn't go well, and a son that, the product of that relationship. And I really liked what you did with the character Christopher, his son, a quiet boy. He plays the violin. He's, he seems to almost be the antithesis, to this hardened cop. Where did Christopher come from in the drawing of the story?
Right. So, good question. So, I don't sort of plan every detail. It's I let it come to me, and my basic principle is sort of maximizing the conflict, and then I'm kind of doing it intuitively. So, once he has this son and this baggage, the character takes on a life of his own, and I think it's my duty then basically to just do the character justice, whatever type of character they are, no matter how good or bad they are. I just try and get into that character's mind and be them to the maximum extent, and kind of let them go where they would go, and not me as the author telling them where they should go.
It's a thing that intrigues me. Many an author talks about it, and I wonder, is there a moment in the writing of a character when it's time to let go, shall we say, and let them show? I mean, is there a moment where you think, it's coming, I can let you do this now? Did you feel that every time you create a character?
Yeah, I think once you initially create the character, and I think it should happen fairly soon, if they're in if you've distinguished them from the other characters and they are an individual to the right level, not every character is as fleshed out as the main character, so it's kind of levels. But once they've been formed, yeah, they should be able to do their own thing. Whatever they're trying to do, you should kind of let them go at it.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of clashing them with the other characters, and basically keeping things moving forward.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna sort of like stop our interrogation of the novel, and I'm going to come to something that listening to you speak about your process, and I've got to ask, what is a fine, upstanding intellectual property lawyer doing in the murky world of psychological thrillers? I mean, were you writing this kind of story before you entered the profession, or did this come later in your professional life? What's the way around of this? Because and even the discussion that we're having, I find it hard to believe that some of the grimness to be discovered deliciously on the page comes from such a decent chap, shall we say, as yourself. Or maybe there's more behind. I'm not sure. Tell us.
Well, that's what it means for me to do justice to the character. If they are a terrible person, you've got to follow them into the depths. But definitely the love of thrillers came first. So I would say when I sort of went from younger people's books to adult books, I was probably reading, Stephen King and Dean Koontz and Tom Clancy, and then going into sort of Patricia Cornwell and Kathy Reichs and Michael Crichton and John Grisham. So I think even at sort of 11, 12, I was sort of obsessed with thrillers. Yeah. So then I probably, studying literature in college probably turned me into a snob for a while. And it was all sort of, more so-called worthy reading and writing. And then I kind of rediscovered my love of thrillers later, once I'd sort of deprogrammed myself from college.
I'm glad. Can I say I'm glad you did? Because we wouldn't probably. Maybe if you'd kept along the same track, and I understand why. Again, that point of view, I get where that point of view comes from, but I'm glad yours changed. Yeah. To get your work out, to the general public. I noted as well, in doing a little bit of research around you, that you are a self-published author.
Yes, I am.
I mean, I have to say, I was a bit like, what do you have for breakfast? Because I noticed, the publication date of your work on Amazon, and it's, oh my God, 2020. While most people were in the throes of, struggling with COVID. You just seem to be putting all this work out. I mean, the truth behind, those books appearing. How did you come to that? What was the process in that?
Well, I would say The Kindness of Psychopaths, I think I started in May 2019. And at that kind of time, I was thinking of, luckily I completed my sort of physical research before the pandemic hit. So that was major. I was, doing the locations and talking to Gardaí and prison officers and that kind of thing. It wouldn't have been finished unless I had done that. So then when the pandemic hit, this was sort of my banana bread or my sourdough starter or whatever. I started with some short stories and then a few novellas. And like a lot of people, I had more time on my hands because of the lockdowns. So I just kind of threw myself into it. And so I released the 3 novellas, sort of bam, bam, bam. Only one of them I had started earlier. The other 2 I just wrote pretty quickly. I wrote The Forbidden Room and The Hostage really quickly. I don't know, maybe 2 months each or something, from idea to out in the world. And then Out of Nowhere was a book I had written some years ago. And the manuscript was sort of sitting there, and it was the book that had originally got me an agent, and a bunch of publishers expressed an interest, but in the end, none of them took it on. So I look back at it and I could see exactly why. It was incredibly waffly and the pacing was just terrible. So I obviously my skill level had improved in the meantime, thank goodness, as it should be doing for anyone who's constantly reading and writing. Over years. So I edited that, and made it a sort of a tighter novel, about half the length. And I thought it was still like a fun story, so I thought I'd release it. So I released an edited version of that. Then I wrote Better Confess, yeah, I wrote that last summer and released it. So that was written and released really quickly over a few months. And then I thought I'd finish this one. So The Kindness of Psychopaths is one I had written most of, and then I wasn't quite happy with it. So I was sort of I came back to it a few times and did various bits. And then finally it just sort of clicked for me and I got the title. Like I said, the title was kind of important, and got the ending, and it just felt right at that point. So it didn't go out, I didn't send it out to publishers or anything. I released it myself as soon as it was done. So it was a kind of a frantic 7 months of publishing and learning about publishing and self-publishing. And like you say, there's the covers as well. It's not just the writing the book. It's like you've got to design the cover and figure out how to format a manuscript and figure out how to get it out
Just
there.
hold that up again for us, will you? So we get the
Yes.
beauty. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, yeah, fabulous, fabulous. I know they say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but when a cover is well chosen, I think it just presenting a book, and that is a beautiful cover. I don't know if this is a bit of a delicate question, because every author is different, but for you, the self-publishing route, was it COVID that gave you that opportunity to focus on this, or is it for you? Do you feel this is the right way to go?
I would say I wouldn't have done it without COVID. I think during COVID, yeah, I think before that I would have been thinking that this has to be traditionally published or it's a failure. I think I would have been looking at it like that, that only, not very good books are self-published. And then during COVID, it was something for me to do to entertain myself. So I wasn't really thinking of making a splash or anything like that. So yeah, I think my patience and my concentration probably went down during COVID as well. So it was just like, if the book's written, get it out, see what people think, and then write another one and see what people think of that, and then write another one.
And from what I've seen, the response to The Kindness of Psychopaths, I mean, people have really enjoyed the way that you tell a story.
Yeah, I mean, I'm delighted. I didn't know what to expect.
And so it makes me think, I mean, there will come a time when yes, COVID will always be with us, but I think there'll come a time when we can move on from it. And I just wonder, given your experience of self-publishing in these times, are you thinking this is the right way for me to go now?
That's an interesting question. And I know some authors are hybrids who do both. They have some traditionally published and some self-published. And I think that's kind of an interesting one because, for example, Better Confess is half the length of The Kindness of Psychopaths. So I would say traditional publishers would not be interested in the book, whatever the quality is, just because of the length.
Yes.
So that's kind of, not every book needs to be 90,000 words.
No. I was really surprised talking to an author last week who had submitted a manuscript and was told it needs to be so many words in order to be.
Exactly, yeah. And they can be very specific. They'll even say, if it's 85, we can find a way to get it up to 90, or something like that. Maybe it doesn't need to be 90.
Yeah. I suppose, I don't know, to me a story has a beginning, a middle, an end, a trajectory, and does it need to be stretched or confined in order for it to
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things about self-publishing that is positive and does, you can release books that are, for example, length that a traditional publisher won't be interested in. Yeah, so I mean, and that's writing a novel that's 200 or 250 pages and reading a novel that's that length is I think a lot of people like that. I like short novels. I like reading them as well. So
Yeah. And I think, I think the world, the world that we live in the West at the moment, that pressure on time, a good novella,
yeah,
can be
absolutely.
just what you want, whilst, I don't know, whilst you're, the commute, or even, if we're back in lockdown and back working on screen, that thing of, I just want to focus on something to take my mind away from being locked on the screen. And this is just like the perfect, just declutter and be,
Exactly.
yeah.
You
And
need
so that,
variety.
yes, without a doubt. And that makes me think, the fact that you write novels and novellas. I mean, do you have a preference? Does your storytelling lend itself to one more than the other? And how does it feel when do you approach them very differently?
Well, it kind of depends on the needs of the story, I would say. Like The Kindness of Psychopaths, there's no way I could have made this short. It's quite complex and there's a lot of characters and it needs a certain length to be able to be paced right and to develop the characters the way I wanted to develop them and all that kind of thing. So that one had to be long. Some of the other ones, they're just dealing with maybe less action, a smaller event. They don't need so much character development or so many scenes or so many chapters. So it kind of depends. Yeah, you might not know you've written a novella until you sort of write the last words, and it's 25,000 words. I think whatever is right for the story.
Thank you. Now, speaking of right for the story, let's go back to The Kindness of Psychopaths. Joe has a colleague, Kevin Boyle. Let's just say that the dynamic between the two isn't particularly positive, but
True.
there's something about Kevin. Oh, title for a novel? No, but there's something about Kevin. There's an aspect to Kevin that is absolutely wonderful, and that's his golden retriever called Babe.
He does love Babe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm. And I just wondered again, that idea of putting in, for a particularly unlikable character, you give them, an element that is just adorable.
I would hate to paint a character completely black or white. I think especially in this novel, you see all of mine, I try to do it in all of my writing, but in this one, you'll see it's definitely shades of gray. And I don't think any of the most of the characters are not really good or bad. I mean, Joe, for example, Joe is mostly good, but he makes mistakes and he gets things wrong, and his temper sometimes gets the better of him. And even someone like Kevin Boyle, has some tender feelings and some affection. So he's not a monster. So I think it's really important to make the characters more realistic, because in real life we don't have cartoons. We have real people.
Yeah,
with flaws and with good sides too.
Yeah, definitely. And I think again that there are moments in the novel where there are some difficult scenes, but again balanced out elsewhere. Yeah. So if we can turn to some of the difficult scenes, and I don't want to go into too many details, because of course readers should enjoy these scenes, but there is a fair amount of brutality in the novel, and I wondered, do you have a limit about what you are willing to describe, or how often you dose the narrative with these moments? And my final comment is to say, sometimes they do seem slightly that black comedy element. Just one thing to mention, that at some point somebody's fingers end up planted in a garden and looking like mushrooms, which, you know, I laughed. I'm not sure if I should have laughed at that point, but I did.
You should, of course.
So just discuss your writing of brutality. Discuss that for us.
Well, I think it's an interesting question because I would never write something brutal just for the sake of writing something brutal. You know, sometimes you see on Netflix they have a category saying like bloody horror films. And I don't really see the point of that. I don't know why anyone would watch a horror film just for the blood. You know, I think it should be part of the story. It should be there because it's necessary. So that's different to a film that is brutal, but the brutality has a purpose. It's an integral part of the story. So if I do write brutality, it's because I think it's appropriate for the characters. It really has to come out of the characters. And I wouldn't say I have a limit, but maybe I wouldn't choose characters in the first place who would do certain things.
Okay, yeah. The idea of if this character were to be, then they're not going to find their way into my book.
Exactly. Yeah. I would say, yeah. I'm not sure if that's a good answer.
No, I think it's really interesting because it's that idea of I'm not even going to give them the chance, knowing what they might do. They're not coming in this. You know, it's like go find somebody else's book to be in because you're not going to be in my book. I can't countenance that.
It's not really, I would say it's not really self-censoring. It's more like, you know, what kind of story are you interested in telling?
Yeah. And there's certain aspects that just for me, it's not a novel that I would want to write. So it's not going to happen. Yeah. Now we've mentioned that there are a number of characters in the book, and what is wonderful, you know, they're written from that multiple voice way. At any point before we go to that, it reminds me of the strands of a tapestry. You know, that it's not just written from one point of view, or it's not just, we don't just learn about one person's thoughts on things. So are you very clear of these strands as you write? Do you write it as a tapestry as you go, or do you write the different elements and then put them together?
I wrote it as a tapestry. I mean, it became a tapestry as I wrote it. I wanted it to be, I think having multiple strands makes for a richer experience. So that's the purpose of that. So you have different characters and different kinds of scenes and different plot lines. So I think, yeah, weaving it all together is a bit of an art. But if you pull it off, I think it gives the reader a kind of a richer experience.
Yeah, definitely a richer experience, and also more of an up close and personal experience. I think you don't feel like you're observing the story, you feel like you're in it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I try to not write any word as Alan Gorevan. I try and write every word from whatever character's point of view I'm in. Every word is from them. So if I was only going to do one character, then I would probably have an information flow problem in most stories. If I was going to write just one perspective, I mean, it's so limiting to only have that one character's awareness and thoughts and knowledge. I mean, it can work depending on the novel, but multiple perspectives definitely gives me much more to play with, much more possibility.
Location, Dublin. What does Dublin mean to you?
Well, it's the place I know best. So definitely, like writing in lockdown, you can't go and visit locations, for example. So there's that. So if I'm here writing, not really leaving the house much, Dublin is a safe place for me to set a book because I know it. So I'm looking forward to setting books in other places once, you know, more travel resumes. I'll be happy to go on some research trips.
Excellent. You mentioned earlier, we were talking about writing prior to lockdown. and being able to consult with Gardaí and prison officers. I mean, making your approach to them, I mean, were people very happy to help you? And what is the thing during that time of being able to consult with professionals? What's the most surprising thing that you learn?
I would say, yeah. I mean, if you go through official channels, it's all very formal. So that was how I had to do it. I was talking to a guard and she advised me to contact the local superintendent in charge of the area. And so I did officially do that. And there was sort of months of emails back and forth and between various different officers. And eventually I got permission to go to the station that's actually mentioned in the Kindness of Psychopaths, Donnybrook Garda Station. So it's a real station in a real suburb. So I got to go there, and that was invaluable because they were so generous. I got to go there and spend hours in the station talking to them and meeting various people. And so for a book like this, where I had to get into Detective Sergeant's head and stay there for a lot of the book, that was massively important. Yeah, it was essential. And they were very generous once I was there and very helpful. There were sometimes some long pauses before I got an answer if I asked something sensitive, like how would you respond to such and such a situation? Like, there's a prison break in the book, and they were sort of thinking carefully before answering questions like that, before giving away sort of tactical information. But they were very generous and very kind. And the same with the prison service. I didn't actually get into the prison, but I did get to speak to some prison officers who were also very generous. And yeah, I think if you're asking people about something they're interested in and that they know well, they're often happy to oblige. Yeah, and also I know in the UK you have some great books like Stuart Gibbon's guides to police procedure, but we don't really have that in Ireland. So unfortunately, so it's more kind of a learn it for yourself kind of thing.
Great. So thank you for sharing that. And again, just to come back if you can, I mean, I don't know, but in the time that you spent, with the professionals, if there was one thing, and I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it again, because that, the sensitive things, but that thing of, oh my God, I never knew that, or, oh, so that's involved. Oof.
I would say I spoke to a retired detective too, and I think the most surprising thing I heard was probably some of his, stories of wild adventures while on duty, which I can't actually talk about. Very interesting, and you know what? It just kind of adds color to the profession. It's anecdotes about sort of real behavior and real incidents. You don't have to mention them directly, but you get a sense of what it's like on the job. And so I think that's more important than, maybe every little detail being right. If you get the sort of the tone right.
And as you're saying this, what's coming to mind is that sense of, very often, I think both in real life and when we read, the law bringers, the justice bringers, we can tend to put them, in a very special place, but the importance to remember that these are human beings in the end, and that's not to say that we shouldn't expect certain standards and certain integrity and things like that. I'm not taking away from that, but that idea of the pressure that we can sometimes maybe place on them.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, and making them, I mean, obviously making them human is a priority when you're writing a novel. You're not just having people of a certain rank doing by the book stuff, because it's never really like that. Yeah, so it's the humanity. Getting that in there is so important.
Now, if I might ask, the end of The Kindness of Psychopaths suggests that there might be more, a sequel, perhaps. Might there be?
There might be, yes. I am working on something at the moment. I definitely feel like I'm not finished putting Joe through the ringer yet.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Because I think, you know, he is such, I don't know, as I said earlier, he wasn't a character that I immediately warmed to and thought, oh no, and then you do, and then, you know, you gain more understanding about this you know, this officer, and thinking, yeah, I would like to see him with other cases, and you know, just that skill that's there, seeing that again on the page. So
Yeah, I will say he'll have more adventures, and they won't be boring.
they couldn't be. I mean, I honestly don't think they could be. Well, Alan, I want to ask one last question, and it's, if you were able to choose that readers took one thing away from the novel, what would it be?
I think it would be that they had an exciting, you know, pulse pounding, keep me up till 4 a.m. reading kind of fun experience, and that they put the book down and, you know, exhaled and were like, wow, and that they have that satisfied feeling at the end.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what I want from a good thriller. I want to be racing through it, and then I want to put it down and be like, whoa.
Yeah, I can say that this reader had that experience, and this reader also had the experience, and again, I don't know whether for you this is a good thing or not, but for me, there is something about crime fiction in its various different forms, written in Ireland, that has an element to it, and I can't say what it is, because you're all very different, and you all, you know, but I don't know whether it's something that, is it in the water? I'm not sure, but there is something that has a sprinkle of magic about it as well. Honestly, is it that you are blessed storytellers, you know, because of that ancient tradition? But that's true of many, many countries, and, you know, but there's just something about Irish crime fiction that is.
Yeah, it's very vibrant at the moment, and it has been for years. So I'm not sure what's behind it, but it's definitely, there's something happening there.
And you're all, you know, there's all those individual voices, and yet there's almost like a, you know, an underlying current, or if it were music, you know, there's an instrument there that seems to be in everybody's music, or a you know, a backing track that's there. I find it fabulous, you know. So you know, viewers, for those of you who like a slice of Irish crime fiction, do delve into this, and do be prepared for not turning off the bedside lamp until well into the night, because it is a novel that will stay with you long after the reading of. Alan, thank you so much for joining us in the consultation room.
Thank you, Jackie. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, and I honestly, I look forward to when we might be coming back to discussing your writing when it's out there again. Is that okay?
I'd love to. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.